Question: despite today's deniers having advanced so far in science, what is the reason they persist in denial and even use their scientific knowledge as a basis for their denial? Answer: knowledge is one of the paths to belief, but knowledge does not mean belief itself. Knowledge is very important. However, knowledge is like driving a plow into the soil while plowing a field. If it is driven in at the right place, at the right time, and from the beginning, not from the middle, it can, in a sense, lead you to the result. But if it is not driven in at the right place and time, it will not lead to the result, rather, it may even cause deviation. One should not regard knowledge as a complete means or a complete cause. It is only one of the causes. If alongside knowledge there is scientific truth, reliance on prophethood, and listening to the prophet, then knowledge becomes, in a sense, a great guide. But where the prophet is not listened to, or even denied, knowledge works in the opposite direction. Knowledge is like a weapon that cuts both ways. Because of what he knows, a person often misleads many, and because of what he knows, he sometimes becomes a means for the guidance of many. Islam has encouraged the love of knowledge. By its very nature, it has essentially connected everything to knowledge. But this knowledge is knowledge that submits to our Prophet and submits to Allah. In essence, those who study knowledge should not deny. For example, I personally attribute the denial of a person who has undertaken serious medical education to superficiality. In the face of human anatomy, a person ought to fall into prostration. In Europe there are many scientists who, while working in their own field, while dealing with the anatomy of the eye, while dissecting it, suddenly faint from awe and astonishment. They say, "What a tremendous mechanism this is." They say, "I know no machine in nature that could produce you, no factory that could weave you and bring you into existence." And before the eye, they fall into prostration. If faith and conviction were explained to such a person, he would fall into prostration before the greatness of Allah. I had also related this in a sermon. A physician friend of mine is a nose specialist. He narrated to me a European professor who explained the nose. After explaining the nose in all its magnificence, he says exactly this: in the face of this magnificent monument, one cannot help but fall into prostration. Yet outwardly it does not seem very perfect to us, just a mucus layer, some cartilage, some flesh, and so on. But it is such a tremendous mechanism. These are the works of Allah, who does not waste anything. From the simplest things, he produces the most astonishing results. You look at it and see rubbish, then you look again and see that from it he makes a diamond. Extraordinary things. This is Allah's work, Allah's art. If a person were to anatomize the human being as a whole, he would faint from awe and fall into prostration. Is it only medicine like this? If you include agriculture, you will see the same thing. You will travel, investigate, and see that the laws are prepared so perfectly that you will witness that it is not possible for such things to be resolved on the looms of nature and causes. If you include engineering, you will see the same thing. I read in a book by Jean, if a person approaches the universe from a mathematical perspective, it is impossible not to say Allah. It is impossible not to say Allah. When you consider the universe from a mathematical perspective, you would think that Allah created the universe with mathematics. You cannot see even the slightest error in mathematical laws. There are such fine calculations and such delicate measures that even the tiniest error would turn the world upside down. There are such precise calculations. If you measure the width and length of the spheres, their diameters, their distances, their weights, the balance will leave you in awe. Likewise, a person who deals with the atom will remain in the same astonishment and awe. Thus, in essence, knowledge is not a means or a tool that leads to denial. But it is a weapon. It depends on the one who uses it. The one who uses it well, who uses it as a material for guidance, will rise toward Allah and rise toward belief in the hereafter. But the one who, from the beginning, through mistakes and false indoctrinations, uses it badly will also become bad. Previously, Europeans who worked with a sense of inferiority and hostility toward Islam benefited from what Muslims had done, surpassed Muslims by 1 or 2 centuries, advanced in technology, industry, and art, and placed them under domination and subjugation. However, the madrasa system failed to respond to the needs of the age. In the madrasas they were still teaching Aristotle's logic, still teaching so-and-so's so-called rational matters. Therefore, Almighty Allah struck that group who did not heed the creational signs with a blow. pull yourselves together. My book is not only the Quran. This Quran is the commentary of the Book of the Universe. Reading and understanding the Book of the Universe will, for the most part, cause you to be rewarded in this world. The punishment for opposing the Quran will, for the most part, be in the hereafter. Because they did not understand this, they were struck. We saw that Europeans solved the agricultural issue, solved the medical issue according to their era, and advanced very far in science and technology. Then we did not neglect the matter from the perspective of science, rather, we handed the matter directly over to Islam. What we see is this: when Western culture reached us, the teachers of that era among Muslims cast off everything specific to Islam, everything belonging to the spirit of this nation, everything expressing identity, and suddenly became blindly infatuated with the West. There was a serious hostility toward the past, so much so that they looked at those who loved the past, who took pride in their history and ancestors, as if they were mad. This was, pardon me, an expression of an inferiority complex, an expression of seeing the West as advancing in a miraculous way. This inferiority complex made them hostile to the past, to glories, to religion and religiosity. We had no real scholars. The adaptationists merely transferred what they saw there. But these people did not know Islam. Everything coming from the West appeared attractive to them. As one of our intellectuals said, if it were possible to take Islam to the West and then import it back into the Islamic world from there, our Western admirers would accept it without hesitation. Thus, the denial of our so-called scholars does not essentially come from knowledge, it comes from an inferiority complex and from blind adaptation of the West. Let me present an example. There are ignorant lecturers who present Darwinism, an issue that even a university student engaged in instruction could easily deal with, as a scientific reality and truth in universities. Such a simple issue. From this it is understood that whatever the West has embellished, adorned, and presented to us has gained a kind of sanctity. This stems from their having advanced somewhat and from our being in a state of inferiority. God willing, in the future, scholars with identity will be raised. They will begin a chemistry book by saying, I begin in the name of Allah. They will say, matter is the smallest particle created by Allah, and they will begin. Recently, by coincidence, I picked up an anatomy-related book in a bookstore. While reading its back page, I saw this written: as long as a person says knowledge, knowledge with his head, and Allah, Allah with his mouth, he will deepen. I do not know the author, he was a professor. I said to myself, may Allah be eternally pleased with you. I do not know who he is. Perhaps medical students know who he is. Let me repeat, knowledge has not led to denial. The misuse of knowledge has led people into denial. But at the foundation of our denial lies blind imitation of the West, an inferiority complex, and the neglect of our ancestors before us in the madrasas.